much in the parable of the bridegroom that we could spend time on today. We could spend a lot of time talking about why did some of the bridesmaids not bring oil? Why did some of them bring oil? Why didn't everybody just share and make it so that everybody could be there? Why didn't they sort of have a lamp every other person and make a really wide circle and go out to meet the bridegroom? We could talk about all of those things, but we're not going to. You're going to have to ponder those things in your heart as you go home this week. Maybe another time we'll parse that parable. Today we're going to spend more time talking about treasure. Now, you see, I noticed that church is fairly sparsely filled today. As soon as you start talking about stewardship, people run for the hills. They don't like to talk about stewardship. They don't like to talk about money. They don't like to have someone stand up here and say, "What are you doing with your checkbook?" It seems rather offensive to them. It's true, in fact, that I have been told over the years, and probably you were too, Reverend Keller, we've never heard anything about tithing before. Never seen that in the Bible before. Where does that say that in the Bible? It does say that in the Bible. Actually, as I said last week, Jesus talks to us a lot about our money and what we should do with our money. Not because he really cares about our money, but because he cares about our hearts and how money controls our hearts. So we're going to continue that conversation, even if it's a little bit uncomfortable. Matthew 6:24 says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be loyal to the one and have contempt for the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. No one can have two masters. I rather imagine you, like me, have seen the license plates that show the phrase, "a house divided," accompanied by the logos of two rival college football teams or professional ball teams, perhaps. Oftentimes, this phrase reminds people of Abraham Lincoln's speech from 1858, in which Lincoln was speaking about and to a nation divided on the issue of slavery. Most people think that phrase, "a house divided," was coined by Lincoln and attribute the phrase to Lincoln, but in fact, Lincoln was quoting the Bible. Jesus said, "If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand, and if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand." Jesus is telling us, in no uncertain words, that competing allegiances in a kingdom or a house or a heart will most certainly lead to destruction. Division has no good ends. And yet, we're often divided, aren't we? We often feel that there are things that compete for our attention, for our time, for our talents, for our hearts. We're sort of raised in an environment where that's true. You know, for many of us, the term multitasking is something that grew up maybe in the last 10 to 15 years. When I was a little girl, if I had said to my mother that I was multitasking, she would have been certain that I was doing neither of the things that I said I was doing well. And she would have said to me, "Leslie, put the book up and do your homework." Or put the book up and clean the bathroom. Or put the book up and help me in the kitchen. Or put the book up and make your bed. She would have said to me, "Do one thing at a time." You cannot attend appropriately to both things, and yet in today's world, the more we can multitask, and the better we think we can multitask, the more valuable we seem to believe that we are. I was multitasking one time making a chocolate cake, and I forgot to put the eggs in the chocolate cake. Cake didn't turn out too good. You cannot serve two masters. Some years ago, many years ago in fact, I was living in Albuquerque and I was working at the hospital, and I love to go and look at houses. And I made the mistake of going on an open house tour one Sunday afternoon, and I found a house, not that I needed a different house, but I found a house that I absolutely, positively fell in love with and became convinced that I had to buy. And so in order to buy this house that I didn't really need, that was really too large for me, but I wanted anyway, I decided that what I needed to do was work basically 2 jobs. And so I worked in the urology clinic from 7 in the morning until 4 or so in the afternoon, and then I ran across town from where my offices were to the main hospital and picked up a shift or shifts in the emergency room. Now, as some of you who are physicians know, emergency rooms are always perennially short-staffed. So you can pick up extra shifts in the emergency room from now until Jesus comes again. So there was no shortage of work for me to do in the emergency room. So I would work in the emergency room from, 4:30 in the afternoon till 11:30 or 12 or 12:30 at night. And for those of you who know me, I am not a night person. I happen to believe that once it gets dark, we should all be at home with our fuzzy slippers on, the blinds pulled, settling down for the evening, and in bed by 9 o'clock. So after about week 2 of this schedule, I was really rather less than pleasant, let's put it that way. And my medical director, a good friend of mine, Phil Vitale, whom I had been working with for many, many years, and with whom I often talked about God and our service to and for and with God, sat me down and said, "Leslie, you can't keep doing this." And I said, yeah, it's fine. I'm only going to do it for probably another 3-4 months and everything, and here's my budget, and here's what I'm doing, and it looks like this. And he said, "Leslie, you can't keep doing this. You cannot serve two masters." I said, "Philip, that's a horrible thing to say. What are you talking about?" I said, "Of course I can. Everything's fine here. Has anything not been taken care of? I'm doing everything I'm supposed to, and things are fine in the emergency room, and it's great." And he said, "Leslie, you cannot serve two masters." And I said, "Philip, tell me what the problem is, and we'll fix it." He said, "Leslie, I'm not talking about the hospital." And I said, "Well, it's time for me to go now." And got in my truck and proceeded to drive across town with his words echoing around. And I got really busy, and it wasn't until much later that night as I was driving home that I realized that Philip was worried about my heart. Well, he was worried I might have a heart attack, but that wasn't the real issue. He was worried that I was losing my focus. He was worried that I was losing my relationship with God in pursuit of a relationship with money and with a house and with having and with building an empire built on sand. Last week, for those of us who were here, we challenged ourselves to consider where we're investing our hearts. If we look at where our time and energy and money is spent, we will see where our hearts are invested. It's easy if you look in your checkbook to see where you're spending your money, isn't it? To see what the bulk of your budget goes to. It's also easy if we look at our calendars. How many of you, when you pull up your calendar, either on your computer or on your iPhone, get nervous? I actually look at mine and I get a little bit queasy. Because I think, who came in last night and put all these things on my calendar? Why is it that I have 12 meetings on one day and 6 of them overlap and I can't possibly get to all of them? Why is it that I have to be Sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no. But what happens is we go about chasing each and every single one of those things and trying to check them off and say that we accomplished them, and we end the day tired and unfulfilled and unfocused. Jesus says that no one can serve two masters. An individual trying to do so will inevitably like one master and hate the other, or be devoted to one master and despise the other. How many times have you chased after something because you just knew it was what you had to have, or the job you had to aspire to, or where you had to go, only to find that when you got there, it wasn't what you really wanted, or where you thought you were going to be? I remember in Rochester with my youth group, these kids had tennis shoes like nobody's business. They were always buying new tennis shoes. There was always some newer version of tennis shoes that they had to get. And it was a big deal. And oftentimes, Mom and Dad would say, I bought you 16 pairs of tennis shoes. I am not buying you another pair. If you want that pair of tennis shoes, you have to earn the money for the tennis shoes. And the kids would go out and they'd earn them. Usually they'd sucker me into buying something. And so they'd earn the money to buy their tennis shoes. And about 3 weeks later, they'd come in with their tennis shoes. And I'd say, how's the tennis shoes? I see you got the tennis shoes. They're really cool. And they'd say, I don't like them that much. They're not what I thought they would be. They're not what I should be focusing on. I'm not saying, please don't hear me say, that you can't make money. We all know we need to make money. We also all know that money provides for us some great joys, some great pleasures, and it allows us to do some amazing things. What I am saying is our relationship with money needs to be in the right perspective. That our relationship with money needs to be in and through the eyes of God. That our lives need to be centered on God and God's wishes for our lives, and that then money will fall into the right place. You see, God, as we heard in our Old Testament lesson, our God is a really selfish God. God does not want shared allegiances. God does not want us to multitask in relation to God. God does not just want a piece of our lives. God created us, and God wants us to stay in relationship with God with all of our lives. God wants everything of us and wants to be everything for us. And if we make Jesus, the Lord and Master, the center of our lives, then all of the other allegiances really kind of fall away, or at least fall into their proper order. You will not be a house or a heart divided. You will be standing on firm ground. So what are the other masters in our lives? What are the masters in your life? What pulls you? Money? Jobs? Family? Commitments we think we need to do. You know, those things that, well, if I don't do this, nobody else is going to. Or, well, if I don't do this, they're going to think badly of me. Or, well, if I do this, it will get me to where I want to get. Those pull us off center. Jeremiah 29:13, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. With your whole heart. With every piece of you. Have you ever really thought about what it means to seek God with your whole heart? With every fiber about it in relationship to our beloved. That when we met that person, everything about us focused on that person and led us and drove us to be in relationship. We wanted that person with our whole heart, but what would it be like if we put our energy like that into seeking God? Psalm 86, for you are great and do marvelous deeds. You alone are God. Teach me your way, Lord, that I may rely on your faithfulness. Give me an undivided heart, that I may fear your name. I will praise you, Lord my God, with all my heart. I will glorify your name forever. Our work in faith is hard work. It's long work. It's work that's made easier with our focus on God. Our lives become more abundant as we focus on God. So our work this week, as we seek to put our treasure in the right place and put our hearts in an undivided space, is to ask ourselves, are we wholeheartedly seeking God? Or is our heart divided? Do we serve or attempt to serve 2 or 3 or 10 masters? And if so, why? How about we change our house divided to serve wholeheartedly and singly the God who